Culture defines everything. Invest heavily in your time. So the overarching message is that for today. And it really is the culture development and actualization is the ultimate competitive advantage for us as we're competing in a very complicated healthcare workforce world. And so that's why, as I got to know Crista and some of the things she's doing in Rhode Island, I asked her to be our presenter today. And so that's going to be pretty fun. You're going to be taking home three things. And here's what they are. Organizational trust is the key tenet to cultural transformation. Number two, recognition platforms matter to staff and to your teams. Number three, action and responsiveness is what physicians and staff want and respect. So welcome to this month's Medville Lyceum. I'm Jim Trouson, the mayor of this little healthcare town, where we invite our citizens and friends to gather to learn about ideas and topics to help them deliver better healthcare to their communities. We stole this idea from another town, ancient Athens, where they offered lyceums to their citizens. Presenters like Aristotle would share ideas worth consideration. We do the same. Our guest is Crista Durand, a Medvillista in our Disruptors Club. She is the president of Newport Hospital in Newport, Rhode Island, and has done that for the last 10 years. Crista is an MBA. She's a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. She was listed by Becker's Healthcare this year as Women in Hospital Presidents and CEOs You Want to Know. So, Crista, we're privileged to have you here. Thank you for you're a busy healthcare executive, and thanks for taking the time to think about this. She has a slideshow that I think is going to be very informative, and you'll have that accessible to you as well. So, Crista, I'm going to quit talking so much and have you talk more here. So, you came up with the topic of the stickiness you want. Why? Tell us about that a little bit. Then I want to circle back around and have you talk about your journey to where you've gotten. You've got a very interesting story, but why this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to join Jim and myself and the rest of the Medvillistas this morning. So I chose the title Stickiness because when we typically think of stickiness, it's something we don't want. But when it comes to employees in terms of recruitment and retention and creating an environment where we want employees to stay and never leave, stickiness to me is really the most profound way to describe employee engagement and employee culture. And, to start the journey, it may be helpful just to give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been here for 10 years, but prior to that, I was a hospital CFO for many years. And I actually worked with another Medvillista who I think is on here, Bruce Cummings, was the chief strategy officer at Lawrence Memorial Hospital. And he was a great mentor. So I want to give Bruce a little shout out because he really emulated the value of culture in people, and I learned a great deal from him. So this topic of culture is probably where I spend minimally 40% of my time, which might sound unusual for a CEO, but I'm happy to go into as we kind of unpack the presentation today on the hows and why and the impact that it's had on our organization.
Crista, tell us about your hospital. How big is it? How many employees do you have?
So Newport Hospital is the only hospital located on Aquidneck Island. So if you're not familiar with Rhode Island, it's a little separate island off the coast. It's beautiful. There's about 5 million visitors that visit Newport every year. So it's a very busy place and considered a worldwide destination. So currently I have 800 employees, and I also have about 350 physicians that are on our medical staff. And so it's a very busy place, and it's award winning, and I'm happy to go into, some of the accolades and why Newport Hospital is such a special place.
Well, why don't you do that? Everybody should be able to see her slideshow on your screen. And again, this will be made available to you. So pay attention. You don't have to write down all the content. So, Krista, why don't you talk us through this? And I may interrupt with a few questions to do
Sure.
some deeper dives into some of these topics that you've got.
Yeah, so I'll give you just a thumbnail sketch about the hospital because I believe the history is important. So back in the 1800s, when a lot of wealthy people traveled to Newport from Philadelphia and New York and other parts of the country, they traveled with their own healthcare teams, nurses and physicians. So for the people that lived on this island that were fishermen and did other things related to tourism, they did not have access to healthcare. So a group of philanthropists got together and they formed a 12-bed hospital, cottage hospital. And from there, 151 years later, we are an award-winning 130-bed hospital. And what I think is important about that is we're seeing hospitals close every day across the country. So it takes a lot of philanthropy, community support, and grit to keep a hospital going. In addition to that, in 1997, which was a pinnacle year for Newport Hospital, we joined the permanent healthcare system in Rhode Island called Lifespan. So it's a 5-hospital system. There's only one academic medical center in Rhode Island. It's called Rhode Island Hospital. So that is the tertiary facility for Newport Hospital. And I think one of the most important accolades that we were just redesignated, we are celebrating our 5th magnet designation for nursing, which is huge. Only about 1% of hospitals across the country have achieved 5 magnet statuses. And I couldn't be more proud of how we really celebrate and recognize and support the nursing profession at Newport Hospital. So just a little bit about the hospital. So I'm sure many of your healthcare institutions have a lot of accolades. And so recently we have been named by Health Grades as a top patient experience hospital as of last week. We're accredited by the Joint Commission, and you can see lots of different accolades. We're the only hospital in Rhode Island that is a diagnostic imaging center of excellence. And we're a baby-friendly hospital. We do about 500 deliveries per year. And last month, we received advanced certification for total hip and knee replacement by the Joint Commission. So I'm not going to read the entire list, but you can see that we really pride ourselves on achieving national designations across various service lines.
Yeah, you must be doing something right. We want to
Got a great team.
get our mind around that too, Krista.
These are the catalyst as to why we've spent so much time in employee engagement and driving our culture. So workforce shortages, there's a lot of competition in the healthcare market. And so you can see here nurses, medical assistants, techs across all of the imaging modalities. And probably something unique to Newport is we are on an island. So you have to take bridges on and off the island. And that can be a deterrent for recruitment and retention of staff. So we're looking at a very innovative model. We're actually borrowing a strategy from Martha's Vineyard Hospital. And we've actually purchased 3 homes. This is like prime time. It's not even public yet, that are close to the hospital. And we're hoping to provide housing for our staff. We'll have about 20 rooms, and it'll be similar to dorm living in that there'll be shared spaces, shared living rooms, shared kitchens. Every room pretty much has its own bathroom and ensuite. So the high cost of living on Aquidneck Island is really a massive deterrent for physicians as well as staff. So that's a huge challenge. The third is provider shortages. So again, not unique to Rhode Island, but we're seeing less and less primary care physicians and specialists, folks not necessarily going into various specialties. So that's one of our challenges. And then obviously net income. So being a former hospital CFO, no margin, no mission. So it's important as a not-for-profit organization that we're making a net income so we can reinvest in our people and our plant and our equipment. And then some of the strengths of the hospital, I would say it's our culture. People walk into this hospital. I actually met someone this morning who was new to the organization, and he said, wow, you walk into this institution and you can feel that it's special. Everyone's friendly, makes eye contact, is not on their cell phone, and is happy to be there. And I'll talk you through the journey of how we got there, because when I walked in here 10 years ago, it's not the same culture that it is today. we have a philosophy here called GSD, get stuff done. And so there's a high degree of accountability across our organization, from my office down to, the cafeteria, from my cafeteria up to my office. And so they're really, we are a results-driven organization. And I believe that that's paramount to success. The next strength that we have is being part of a large system. We're about a $3 billion healthcare system. We have many system level service lines, from oncology to neurosurgery to general surgery and orthopedics. And so we really have great service line strength. And one of my favorite things, and so I may do this before we end this meeting today, is I'm shameless and will ask anybody for money. So we have a very strong philanthropic community in Newport. People are very prideful of this hospital. They know that's where they're going to seek care. And so there's a significant amount of community support. And just to digress for a quick second, when COVID hit, we obviously had to do fundraising very differently. And one of the things that I learned and really rallied around is how much this community supported Newport Hospital. And we were seeing donations in six figures for about a year solid, just because people wanted to make sure that we had the equipment, the resources, and the people to take care of the community. So there's a lot of like-minded, not-for-profit organizations on Aquidneck Island. And probably the biggest piece, and I think one of the core tenets for me, is I've had, with the exception of one executive, the same executive leadership team since I joined. So I know that all good things don't last forever. And so that's something I'm extremely mindful of, that what am I doing as a leader to motivate and to retain my executive team? But we wouldn't have the results that we have without having a consistent executive team across all of the disciplines. And I'll pause there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Crista, a lot of us at Medvel have learned from you about how you're keeping an executive team around and overall your staff. Could we double click on that for a minute? Because your stay interviews are something that has resonated with me, and I've learned from you. Thank you very much. So for example, when I do the annual one-on-one interviews with the Medvelises, I ask them, what would keep you from renewing? And I stole that shamelessly from you. So to tell us how did you come up with that? How is that working?
Yeah, so the stay interviews actually was a great idea from my chief nursing officer. Orla went to a conference. She's also a magnet surveyor. And so she firmly believes in I would say the philosophy of magnet. And she came back from an organization and said, they do stay interviews. They do them with nursing, but I think we should do them hospital wide. So we sat down as an executive team and we put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to survey 50% of our entire workforce, including our medical executive committee, and we're going to ask the same 5 consistent questions. And the purpose of the stay interview is that it's completely distinct and separate from your annual evaluation. It's really about creating that connection between you and your frontline manager. And in 9 cases, that was me, right? So I have 9 direct reports. So I conducted stay interviews, and then we compiled those results, and then we did it department by department. So we started the journey, and we do it every year. We've done it 4 years in a row, October 1st, which is the start of the new fiscal year. And we give leaders until March 31st to complete those interviews. And the questions are very organic. It starts out with, how are you doing? I'm excited to meet with you today. Tell me what you're learning at work. How can I better support you as a leader? And then we get into the more difficult questions. Have you thought about leaving us recently, and why? And so that can stimulate a lot of good conversation. And then from there, we always close with, again, it goes back to, how can I support you? And, are you doing meaningful work? And in my role as your leader, how can I help you get to the next level? So we take all of those results and we distill them, and then we share them with the organization. So these are the themes of the stay interview. So you glean a lot of really positive aspects too. So what we learn is that People like each other here. They like their coworkers. They refer to this as their work family. One of the things that we've really instilled is job flexibility and work-life balance. We have to recognize I'm getting older, and the younger generations, they really value flexibility. So we're creating different work schedules for nurses. It's challenging because we're obviously a 24/7 organization. People feel appreciated and supported. So what that's telling us as leaders is keep doing the good things that we're doing. And what are the things we want to work on? And that's on the right-hand side of the slide. So we've heard you, I understand you've hired me into a role. And I'm going to give you an example as a labor and delivery nurse. So we only do 450 deliveries. Shouldn't say only, it's a fair amount of deliveries. But there are many times, right, that we're not delivering babies every single day. It's like 1.33 deliveries a day. I think that's what it comes out to. So those nurses know they're going to have to float on another unit. So what they're saying is, I want to float, but train me to float. Give me the skills to float. And so that was a big takeaway with our educational department to look at all nurses and all staff that floats across the organization and develop a training platform for them. The other piece that came out of the opportunities, we're dealing with difficult patients and difficult family members, and I would say verbal abuse to our staff. And so we've made significant investments in workforce safety and de-escalation training. So those are just some of the things that can come out of the stay interviews. And we've tracked and trended this over the last 4 years. And this year we've decided to take a little bit of a different tact, and we're going to dig a little deeper about meaningful work with our stay interviews for this 5th year as we start in October.
So, Krista, question. I love what you're talking about with flexibility for the younger workers, especially, if not a lot of us that don't want to work full time as we get older. How does a big hospital do that? Isn't that awfully complicated?
Yes, so I would say it's more of an art than a
big?
science, right? So we have multiple IT systems and many leaders, and I'll give you an example. Like we have a 28-bed inpatient rehab unit. So different complexity of patients. Obviously, there's also physical therapy, speech and occupational therapy. And the leaders of that particular unit have created a system where employees can go in and they can select the shifts they want to work. And so there obviously are some blackout dates, in terms of holidays and things of that sort, but it's creating a level of flexibility based on your personal circumstances or just your professional circumstances and how much you want to work. So we're doing that. In addition to that, we have some hybrid roles, right? So there are folks that are working hybrid. There are folks that are working remote. Some of those back-end functions such as billing and coding and financial counseling. So it's really a hybrid approach across the hospital. Probably one of the biggest things that we've done from an innovation perspective is we have a full-on tele-ICU because we couldn't recruit doctors. So we had to make the decision, either we're going to close the ICU or we're going to have a tele-ICU. And our physicians and our nurses rallied around that to leverage technology so we could keep patients close to home. So it really has been I would say a full court press in terms of how we have created flexibility across the organization.
Yeah. You're keeping employees around. What do you think they're looking for now? The kind of employee that you want. How has that changed in
Oh
your
God, it's
10
how
years
do we
here?
have mimosas at these things? Because if we do, I'm gonna pour myself one. No, so I think a couple of things. I think one of the big takeaways I want to share is that when you're trying to change culture, you can't boil the ocean. So you have to pick 2 to 3 tactics that you feel are going to make the most meaningful impact. So I recently went to a conference and these 2 CEOs from Northwell Health said something that really stuck with me. They said, do you want to take 2 balls and move them 50 yards, or do you want to take 50 balls and move them 2 yards? And obviously you want to move the 2 balls 50 yards because the other is really difficult and it's hard work. So here at Newport Hospital, the 3 things that we did to really engage our workforce, stay interviews was number 1. The second thing is we created what's called a Bright Ideas program. And I know that might sound simplistic, but this has gotten so much traction and legs that people are seeking out to submit ideas because it lets employees know they've been heard, they feel value, and then when their idea gets implemented, they're like, hey, leadership is listening. And the third thing we did was create what's called the President Advisory Council. And that's something that I co-lead with frontline staff. And so employees know that they have access to senior leadership, that we're results driven. And no, we can't do everything, right? We have a finite amount of resources, but we prioritize those bright ideas and we track and trend those over time. And just going back to this slide, if I could for a second, this slide here, I think this really tells the tale. So there's a basketball coach. I don't know if he's still there, but he coached the Houston basketball team. This was a few years ago. They went pretty far in the NCAA. And what he said was, we water the roots here, not the leaves. And so really getting under the hood and understanding what motivates each player on your team, what makes them tick, what do they value? And then we've created this program, a tactical program here, as you can see, through executive rounding, through surveying the staff, and then the stay interviews, the bright idea program, employee forums. And I want to close with the shift in your shoes program, which if you get tongue-tied on that, it can come out wrong. But that's a new tactic that we did recently that was very successful, and taking action. And we've also learned post-pandemic that well-being is really important to our staff, regardless of tenure. So we've built out a whole platform for our employees, from a state-of-the-art mindfulness center, which they designed with us, co-designed with our President Advisory Council. We have a 24/7 gym with Pelotons and state-of-the-art equipment, which is free. So again, regardless of shift, you have access to a state-of-the-art gym. And then one of the other things we learned was people need access to healthy food. And our cafeteria closes because we're small. So we put in a 24/7 cafe with a lot of healthy choices. So these types of things give employees, when they walk in the door, lots of different options. So that stickiness is going to be created based on what things resonate with you. And then the last piece is, we know everybody wants to feel valued, right? So feeling valued is important. So I went to a conference in Chicago a couple years ago, and this one hospital started something called the President's Coin. And I'm gonna grab one. So of course, right, you borrow ideas. So I have these coins, and it's also something very similar to the military. I don't know if you can see it. And basically, it's when it has 5 stars on the back. And if you go above and beyond and do something, and I find out, I come and seek you out and I give you a President's Coin. And what's unique about this coin program is you can keep the coin. Most employees keep it in their pocket. And in 2 years, I've only given out 8 coins. So it's very special. Or if you see something that you believe is extraordinary, you can pass the coin forward. So these are just some of the tactics that worked here. And I think part of my message is, it might work in our environment, it may not work in yours. Well,
Crista, what do you do personally to model this behavior? You've got hundreds of employees,
yeah,
and you talk a lot about execution is the hard part. So you're talking to a bunch of CEOs here. What are you doing right that seems to have worked yourself personally? Because it looks like you are walking the talk, and that's got some kind of a trickle-down effect.
Yeah, so I would say executive rounding is really important. And so I do that on all 3 shifts, and so does my senior team. So my CMO and my CNO and myself, that we really create the triad model. So people know on Fridays at 10 a.m., typically you're going to see Jeff, Orla, and Crista walking through the hospital. And then we come in early and do 3rd shift rounds on a different day, at 5 in the morning. And then we'll do 2nd shift rounds, at a different time. So being out there and not hiding behind your title and being relatable and authentic is very meaningful, because I want people to walk up to me and talk to me. So if I'm walking through the hospital and no one's making eye contact and talking to me, that's not a good thing. But if I'm walking floor by floor and it takes me 4 hours to go through this hospital, that means I've been effective. And so it's being out there and visible, and not hiding behind your title or hiding in your office, which is easy to do. And then I think, to answer the second part of your question, Jim, it's prioritizing those things, right? So what's most meaningful to those employees, and investing in the resources and following through. Because if you don't follow through as a leader, you lose credibility.
Well, because there's the danger of them telling you that, they don't like the flavor of cookies or whatever.
And they do.
What do you do with that? Because isn't that the hard part, is leaving that rounding
Yes.
and giving them a sense that you listened?
Yeah, so I think what I have found with employees that if they have an idea, not all my ideas are good, not all of your ideas are good, but if they feel heard and listened to, that's what the key takeaway is. We can't do everything because we have a finite amount of resources. We might not be able to do everything because of a facilities constraint, a logistics constraint, et cetera, et cetera. But it's being able to give them an answer to say, we can do it and this is why. We can't do it, this is why, or we need more information or more time. And that approach time and time again works because you're getting
Mhm.
back and you have that close communication and bi-directional communication loop with the staff.
Yeah. Krista, you've talked about the uh, the role of the ideal healthcare leaders changing.
Yeah.
Will you talk about that a little bit more? Because through the ACHE, you've been pretty stimulated by that. And what are some of your challenges, or how are you becoming a more modern healthcare leader?
Yeah, I think the word that I would use to describe the healthcare is so disruptive today, and there's just every day there's a host of things coming at us. So I believe that adaptability is key. And so being adaptable to me is one of the core tenets of a successful healthcare leader today and for the future. And the other piece is evaluating your structure. So the traditional structures and traditional roles are kind of going out the window. So my chief nursing officer, for example, she doubles as the CNO and also the COO of the organization, and we've moved things around under her areas of responsibility. In terms of my role as the president of Newport Hospital, I also have system level responsibilities for lifespan, and I oversee the entire portfolio of all the rehab services. So inpatient, outpatient, and there's quite a few of those. And so so to me, the message is that we need to skill ourselves up, right? Coach up, skill up, reskill. That's really kind of the buzzword, that leaders need to be reskilled, because if you're not adapting to the changes that are happening, you're going to basically find yourself falling behind.
Thank you. Krista, tell us about COVID. Uh, how are you and Newport Hospital different because of that crisis?
Yeah, so what's interesting about COVID, and I'm going to flip to this slide if I can. So we were doing very well with patient experience, employee engagement pre-COVID. And then obviously when COVID happened, we fell off the cliff, right? Because we couldn't communicate. We did everything virtually. It was very difficult to get employees together, get physicians together, and it was very challenging. During COVID, we actually had very high retention. People really weren't moving anywhere, right? They were staying where they were at. There was so much uncertainty, and the future was a little bit unknown at that time. So now in the post-COVID world, where probably many of us have had travelers, out the wazoo, exorbitant costs, trying to deal with that, trying to level set. That's when we took a step back and said, okay, how are we going to rebuild the culture at Newport Hospital? And that's when we put together this slide that you're seeing about culture, and really said, we're going to commit to it. We're going to invest in it. We're going to communicate it broadly. We're going to monitor it. And what sticks, we're going to keep doing. And if we fail something, we're going to fail fast and we're going to move forward. So it was a very deliberate and intentional strategy. And what we found by a virtue of doing that, our finances improved, our patient experience improved, our engagement improved, and our quality improved substantially.
Was COVID a gift?
It was a terrible gift, but it was a gift.
So another thing I've learned from you, Krista, is when you've said, fail fast, pivot, move forward. Tell us about the challenges you've had to do that with 400 and some employees.
Yeah, so a couple fail fast things. We started a couple of service lines that we thought were going to meet the community needs, and then realized very quickly that financially they didn't make sense. And so we unwound those very quickly with an exit strategy. I still have some scars by virtue of doing that, but I think as a leader, that when you make a mistake, you acknowledge it, you communicate it, and you move forward. Another example from a leadership perspective that we did is we started this buddy system where we thought it was a good idea, senior leaders, to have a member of management go to another department and sort of be a buddy. And what we found was that we didn't clearly share what the expectations of that program was, and it was a failure. So we very quickly unwound it and took ownership for it and said, this was a failure, we're moving fast. And then we segued into something very recently called Shift in Your Shoes, which is something that I love. And what you see is sort of the scores up here. So you can see the journey of, just to digress again, so from 2018, and then when COVID hit, you can see, boom, we're the green line, we kind of plummeted down into the ocean. And now you can see that we've eclipsed the national average and exceeded it. So because of the buddy program got a lot of, I will say, negative publicity, but never a crisis is never bad. So we started a different program where, I just want to go to it. It called Shift in Your Shoes, where we actually shadowed staff. And it was, I don't know if I have a slide on this one, but it was pretty remarkable, where I actually shadowed a CNA for 4 hours, and then I shadowed our behavioral health medical director in the behavioral health inpatient unit. So 50 leaders at the same time were deployed across the organization from 8 in the morning until noon if you want to do that shift, or you could have extended it to 2 o'clock. And the buzz that gave employees, because they felt valued. And so we're going to do that. We did that just in July, and we're going to do that again in December. So versus the buddy program with a manager and a department, which was like a 6-month deal and didn't work, this sort of quick hit really gave us a lot of credibility and built up a lot of goodwill.
Mm-hmm. In about 5 minutes, we're going to go to our unrecorded group discussion about this. So in the meantime, Crista, are there other slides that I've preempted that you want to get to? And also any sort of maybe summary or closing thoughts that you would advise us to do things differently, so perhaps our organization can enjoy the same success that Newport Hospital has.
Yeah, I think just quickly, the Bright Ideas program is something I just put the slide up, something we started back in 2021. And it was because we couldn't get, because this was during the height of COVID, we couldn't get people together, and they needed a venue to share ideas. And those ideas could be around patient experience, employee engagement, financial, or quality improvement. And I have one leader assigned to managing this program. And our intention was, if you submit an idea within 10 business days, you'll get a disposition. We can do it, we can't do it, and here's the reason why, or we need more information. So you can just see here, like we've had this, it's been pretty consistent. And a lot of these programs have shelf lives. And what we're finding is that this program has a lot of credibility. You can either submit a card, or there's a QR code, and you can go online to the form. And if we implement your idea, you hold the big light bulb in front of your idea, and employees and doctors love this. So it doesn't have to be complex. It's a very simple program, but we've made a lot of improvements across really the spectrum of healthcare to make Newport Hospital better for our patients and our staff. Mm-hmm. And then the only other thing I want to mention quickly is the President Advisory Council. So I spent a lot of time in this, and we started this in 2021, and you had to self-nominate yourself. It's only frontline staff, and I meet with them once a month. And so I'm now in my 4th President Advisory Council, and it has been probably the most impactful thing for me as the leader of the organization, to sit shoulder to shoulder with my staff, to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And again, this group is making, pretty major decisions on how we're shaping Newport Hospital today and for the future.
Any other summary or conclusions, advice, Crista, before we move on?
Yeah, I just think that healthcare is a relationship-based business, as we all know, but yet I think a lot of times we don't lead it that way, and we're not intentional enough with that. And I think if you can invest in every team member's success in your organization, you coach up, you skill up, and you show up your authentic self every day, you will see a difference. And then probably my closing thought is that changing and moving culture is hard, but it really is the underpinning of employee engagement. And so I wish you well, and I thank you for listening to my journey.